Your baby cannot tell you when something feels wrong. There is no sentence, no complaint, no way to explain that a moment between you two left them feeling confused or unseen. All they have is their body, a racing heart, a spike in stress hormones, a stillness that looks like calm but is actually shut down. Researchers who study infant physiology have found that babies register emotional disconnection within seconds, long before they have any language to describe what just happened to them. Their tiny nervous systems are constantly scanning the environment, and the most important variable in that environment, more important than room temperature, lighting, or noise, is the emotional availability of the person holding them. Most parents have never been told this, because it isn't something that shows up on a pediatric checklist or gets mentioned at a wellness visit. It lives in the small, invisible exchanges that happen so fast most adults never even notice them consciously. Today we're breaking down 5 science-backed signs that your baby might be feeling emotionally disconnected from you, signs most parents have never heard of, even though they happen every single day. Stick around for sign number 3 because that one surprises almost every parent who hears it. Welcome to Silent Baby Mind. Subscribe right now because what you're about to learn today will permanently change the way you look at your child. Sign number 1, your baby stops reacting to your face. This sounds backwards, since most parents assume a quiet, easy baby is a calm, content baby. But psychologist Mary Ainsworth's research tells a very different story. In her famous strange situation experiment, she watched how babies reacted when a caregiver left the room and then returned, categorizing their responses into distinct patterns that would shape attachment research for decades to come. The babies with the healthiest attachment protested honestly when their caregiver left, then settled warmly when she came back, seeking comfort before returning to play once reassured that everything was fine again. But some babies showed no reaction at all. They seemed eerily unbothered by the separation, almost too well behaved for their age. Ainsworth called this avoidant attachment, and later researchers found these babies were not actually calm on the inside. Their heart rates and stress hormone levels told a completely different story than their faces did, a finding that surprised even experienced researchers the first time it showed up in the data. They had simply learned through repeated experience that expressing distress did not change anything, so their nervous system essentially gave up sending the signal in the first place. This means a baby who protests is not being difficult. A baby who protests is functioning exactly the way a healthy attachment system is supposed to function, reaching out because reaching out has historically worked. And a baby who seems unusually easy may sometimes be telling us something more concerning than a baby who cries loudly every time something feels off. This single reframe has changed how an entire generation of pediatric professionals think about infant temperament and what good behavior actually signals. Sign number 2, your baby's bids for attention go unanswered. This is the foundation that psychiatrist John Bowlby built his entire theory around, after decades of studying what happens to children when their early bids for connection go unanswered repeatedly. Babies are not just looking for food and warmth. They are biologically driven to seek a consistent emotional anchor, a specific person whose presence tells their nervous system that the world is safe enough to explore. He called this the attachment behavioral system and argued it evolved for survival. An infant who could reliably keep a caregiver close had a far greater chance of staying alive than one who could not, since a wandering, unattached infant would have been far more vulnerable to danger in our evolutionary past. When that anchor is unreliable, even in small, unintentional ways, the baby's stress system stays activated far more than it should be for healthy development. This is not about dramatic neglect in the way most people picture it. It's about thousands of micro moments where a baby reaches for connection and gets something other than what they needed. A missed glance, a delayed response, a parent whose body is present but whose attention is somewhere else entirely. Bowlby's theory was controversial when he first proposed it, since at the time, many experts believed infants simply needed their physical needs met and that emotional responsiveness was a secondary concern at best. Decades of subsequent research proved him decisively right. Sign number 3, your baby's face goes still after trying to reach you. This is the one that surprises almost everyone, because it was discovered through a now famous experiment by developmental psychologist Edward Tronick, one of the most cited studies in the entire field of infant psychology. Tronick asked mothers to interact normally with their babies for a few minutes, then hold a completely neutral, unresponsive expression while still facing their child directly. Within moments, the babies tried everything in their power to bring their mother's face back to life. They smiled bigger, reached out, made sounds, arched their whole bodies toward her, using every tool in their limited behavioral repertoire to restore the connection. When nothing worked, the babies didn't just get upset. They turned away. Their posture collapsed and their physiological stress markers climbed dramatically, sometimes within a single minute or two. Tronick's conclusion was that babies constantly use a caregiver's face as a mirror to understand their own emotional state and their own safety in the world around them. When that mirror goes blank, even briefly, their brain doesn't interpret it as mom is tired or mom is busy right now. It interprets it as something is wrong, and often, more specifically, as something is wrong with me. Think about how often a baby today sits a few feet away from a parent who is physically present but facially absent. Attention locked onto a phone, scrolling through a notification that felt urgent but really wasn't worth the moment it cost. It's not cruelty. It's just modern life moving at the pace it moves at. But to an infant's nervous system, it can register the same way Tronick's experiment did. A face that should be alive and responsive suddenly going flat and distant without warning. What makes this especially relevant today is that screens didn't exist when Tronick first ran this experiment back in the 1970s, yet the still face effect he documented plays out in millions of households every single day now, often for far longer than the 2 or 3 minutes used in his original controlled study. Sign number 4. Your baby's emotional signals stop matching yours. Psychiatrist Alan Shores took this research a step further by studying what actually happens inside a developing brain during these countless face-to-face exchanges between baby and caregiver. The right hemisphere of the brain, the part responsible for processing emotion, reading nonverbal cues, and regulating stress, develops largely through these early nonverbal exchanges, well before language even enters the picture for a young child. Every time a parent's face responds in sync with a baby's emotional state, a smile met with warmth, a moment of distress met with a soothing expression. The baby's brain is literally being shaped in that instant, new neural connections forming in real time based on the quality of the exchange. Shore described this as one of the primary mechanisms through which humans learn to regulate their own emotions later in life, long before they ever hear the words feelings or emotions spoken aloud by anyone. A child whose early emotional signals are consistently met with matching, attuned responses tends to grow into someone who can self-soothe and recover from stress without becoming overwhelmed by it. A child whose signals are consistently met with flat or mismatched responses tends to struggle with emotional regulation well into adulthood, sometimes in ways that surface decades later in relationships that seem to have nothing obviously to do with infancy at all. Shore often described this process as the building of an internal regulatory system, one that once established in those early years continues operating largely outside conscious awareness for the rest of a person's entire life. Psychologist Ruth Feldman expanded on this body of work by studying synchrony specifically, the rhythm and timing between a parent and infant during ordinary everyday interaction. She found that it is not constant stimulation or nonstop engagement that builds secure attachment, but rather the back-and-forth quality of interaction, connection, followed by rest, followed by reconnection, almost like a conversation that uses no actual words. Babies are not designed to be entertained nonstop from morning to night. They're designed to engage, then pull back to process and regulate, then re-engage again once they're ready. And pushing past that natural rhythm tends to backfire rather than deepen the bond between parent and child. A baby looking away during play isn't being unresponsive or rude in any sense. It's doing exactly what a healthy nervous system is supposed to do. And a parent who respects that pause is actually supporting the very regulation skill they hope their child will develop over time. Feldman also found that this synchrony could be measured biologically, with parent and infant heart rates and hormone levels shifting into alignment during moments of genuine connected interaction, a kind of physiological duet that most parents have absolutely no idea is happening beneath the surface. Sign number 5. The back and forth rhythm between you breaks down. The Harvard Center on the Developing Child calls this pattern serve and return. A baby sends out a signal, a sound, a look, a small gesture, and that is the serve. When a caregiver responds to that signal in a timely, matching way, that is the return. Harvard's researchers found that this back and forth pattern is one of the most important architectural forces in early brain development, more influential by far than almost any toy, class, or educational product currently on the market. What matters is not how elaborate or impressive the response is. What matters is simply that it happens, and that it happens with reasonable consistency across the thousands of small exchanges that fill an ordinary day. A baby whose serves are regularly met with returns builds neural pathways associated with trust, curiosity, and stress regulation, pathways that will go on to support learning and relationships for the rest of their life. A baby whose serves are frequently missed, not out of neglect, but simply because life is busy and full of competing distractions, builds a slightly different set of expectations about how responsive the world is generally going to be toward them. Now here's the part that should change everything about how you feel after hearing these 5 signs, so don't tune out just yet. None of this means parents need to be perfectly attuned every single moment of every single day. One of the most reassuring findings across this entire body of research is what psychologists call the good enough standard. Securely attached children don't come from parents who never miss a cue. They come from parents who miss cues regularly, the way every human being does, every single day without exception, and then repair the disconnection afterward. A parent who gets distracted, misses a baby's bid for attention, then circles back later with warmth and presence is not failing at this. They are demonstrating exactly the kind of relationship a developing brain actually needs to witness. The repair may be just as important to brain development as the original connection would have been in the first place, because it teaches a baby that disconnection is not permanent and that the people they love do come back. Researchers studying repair specifically have found that children who experience a healthy pattern of rupture and repair often develop more resilience than children whose early years had very few ruptures at all, simply through repeated practice, trusting that things can go wrong and still be made right again. So what does this actually look like in daily life? It looks like putting the phone down for a handful of minutes several times a day to be fully facially present, since that exchange does more developmental work than almost anything else you could possibly be doing in that moment. It looks like resisting the urge to immediately distract a fussy baby and instead pausing to notice what they might be communicating. Overstimulation, hunger, tiredness, or simply a need for a break from input before they're ready for more again. It looks like recognizing that a baby turning away during play is regulation, not rejection of you personally, and following their lead back into connection when they're ready rather than pushing harder in that exact moment. It looks like responding to cries with reasonable consistency, not because every single cry requires an instant 5-second response, but because a baby's nervous system is learning through thousands of small repetitions whether the world tends to answer back when they ask. And it looks like letting go of the idea that any single missed moment, one distracted afternoon, one short-tempered exchange, defines your entire relationship, because what shapes a child long-term is the pattern across thousands of interactions, never any individual one in isolation. It also looks like giving yourself permission to be an imperfect, ordinary, occasionally exhausted human being, because that is exactly the kind of caregiver the research says babies actually need to thrive. What makes this research so important right now is that none of it requires special equipment, expensive classes, or extra time most parents simply don't have available. It requires attention, the kind that is becoming genuinely harder to sustain in a world full of constant digital pull on every direction. but it is also the kind that remains completely free and available to any parent willing to practice it, regardless of income, background, or how many other responsibilities are competing for their focus on a given day. The babies in Tronick's studies who recovered fastest from the still face experiment were not the ones whose mothers never went still in the first place. They were the ones whose mothers came back warmly afterward, with extra warmth that seemed to communicate, "I am here again. You can relax now." That single fact captures almost everything this research is trying to tell us. Disconnection itself is not the danger here. Staying disconnected is. If there's one thing to take away from these 5 signs, spanning the work of Ainsworth, Bowlby, Tronick, Shore, and the Harvard Center on the Developing Child, it's that your baby isn't silently keeping score of every imperfect moment you have together. They're reading patterns, and the pattern they're looking for is simple. Does connection come back afterward? Every single time you notice a missed moment and choose to return to your baby with warmth, you are doing exactly the work their developing brain needs from you right now, building the foundation for who they will become long after they've forgotten every individual moment that built it. Make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and leave a comment below. See you in the next one.